In the quiet hours of the night, the bustling world of an international airport holds secrets that never reach the light of day. Standing in the long lines of weary travellers, something extraordinary has arrived. A discovery so bizarre and terrifying that it could shatter the ordinary lives of those who stumble upon it. Welcome to 5 Minutes to Midnight, a scary story podcast where every episode is a journey into the heart of darkness. Prepare yourself for an unforgettable journey into the shadows where the unimaginable lurks in plain sight in Unclaimed Cargo.
The customs officer at Jorge Chavez International Airport had been on the job for nearly 2 decades. Nothing fazed him anymore. Not the sobbing tourists begging to bypass security, nor the frustrated businessmen who demanded special treatment. But today was different. The man standing before him seemed unremarkable at first. Slim, mid-20s, and with the slightly harried look of someone navigating international airports. It was the way he moved that caught the officer's attention. The man's torso seemed unnaturally stiff, his belly bulging in a way that didn't align with his otherwise wiry frame. "Señor," the officer said in Spanish, gesturing for the man to step aside, "please lift your shirt." The man hesitated, his dark eyes darting to the crowded terminal. Reluctantly, he pulled his shirt up to reveal a horror that sent the officer stumbling back. Strapped around the man's torso were 2 girdles, bulging grotesquely with writhing, twitching masses. Hundreds of small plastic bags filled with crawling creatures were packed together like some nightmarish mosaic. The officer gagged at the sight of hairy legs, segmented bodies, and venomous mandibles pressing against the clear plastic. "Tarantulas," the officer whispered, his voice trembling. He recognized the oversized, hairy arachnids immediately. Then came the centipedes, their long, sinuous bodies coiling and uncoiling like restless serpents. And finally, he noticed the smaller bags containing bullet ants, their name enough to strike terror into anyone familiar with their agonizing sting. The man, a Chinese citizen, was quickly detained and whisked away to a sterile holding room. Authorities catalogued his grotesque cargo: 320 tarantulas, 110 centipedes, and 9 bullet ants, all native to the Amazon basin. They were illegally harvested, destined for the lucrative underground market of exotic pets and collectors. Yet, as the officers worked, an eerie unease settled over them. The room seemed unnaturally quiet, despite the dozens of living creatures. One officer swore he felt something crawling along his neck, though there was nothing there when he slapped at it. By nightfall, the man sat alone in the holding cell, his face pale and slick with sweat. The creatures had been confiscated and secured in another room, but he was still haunted by their incessant, invisible movements. The girdles had clung to his skin like a second layer, the adhesive tape pulling painfully at his flesh when they were ripped away. And then came the voices. At first, they were whispers, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. He told himself it was exhaustion, that the grueling ordeal had frayed his nerves. But the whispers grew louder, sharper, their language guttural and alien. "Why did you take us?" The man jerked upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stared at the empty cell, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The voice was inside his head. "You ripped us from our home. You wrapped us in suffocating prisons. Now you will see how it feels." Pain exploded in his abdomen. He screamed, clawing at his stomach as if trying to tear it open. The guards rushed to his cell, but the man didn't see them. He saw only the swarm. Hundreds of spiders, centipedes, and ants poured from his belly in a tide of writhing bodies and skittering legs. They weren't coming out of the plastic bags anymore. They were emerging from him. His skin split open, tarantulas crawling from the gaping wounds, their hairy legs slick with his blood. Centipedes slithered from his mouth, their segmented bodies wriggling with impossible force. Bullet ants streamed from his eyes, their sharp mandibles glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. The guards recoiled in horror, too stunned to react. By the time they overcame their paralysis, it was too late. The man was dead, his body a hollow, shredded husk. The swarm scattered, disappearing into vents, cracks, and unseen crevices. By morning, the airport was a scene of chaos. Reports flooded in from terrified passengers and staff. Someone claimed to have seen a tarantula the size of a dinner plate crawling through a luggage carousel. Another described a centipede coiled inside a coffee cup, its venomous fangs bared. The most chilling account came from a janitor who found a bullet ant in a child's toy, its sting leaving the boy screaming in agony. Juan Garcia, a wildlife specialist for the Peruvian government, arrived to assess the situation. He had spent years studying the illegal trafficking of endangered species, but this was unlike anything he had encountered. The confiscated creatures were gone, the plastic bags they were held in shredded as if by claws. "What happened to the smuggler?" he asked the lead officer. The man's face was ashen. He didn't survive." "Cause of death?" The officer hesitated, then muttered, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." As Garcia examined the cell, a deep sense of dread filled him. There were no bodies, no evidence of the swarm except for faint trails of ichor leading into the ventilation system. He realized with a mounting horror that the creatures were loose, and worse, they weren't behaving like ordinary insects. It was as if they were hunting. By nightfall, the airport was under lockdown. Officials assured the public it was a precautionary measure, but the truth was far more sinister. The swarm had spread beyond the terminal, sightings reported in nearby neighborhoods. People described bizarre, inexplicable phenomena, doors slamming shut on their own, lights flickering, and whispers in the dark. One woman claimed to have seen her pet dog devoured alive by a mass of centipedes that dissolved as quickly as it appeared. A shopkeeper described bullet ants crawling up his legs, their stings rendering him immobile as tarantulas descended from the ceiling. "They're not just insects," Garcia whispered to himself as he pored over field reports. "They're something else, something ancient." The creatures weren't simply displaced. They were angry, and their wrath extended beyond the smuggler who had stolen them. They had been taken from the depths of the Amazon, where local legends spoke of spirits guarding the rainforest. The girdle of terror had not just transported exotic wildlife, it had unleashed a curse. By the end of the week, Lima was a city under siege. Hospitals overflowed with victims of venomous bites, their symptoms unlike anything medical professionals had seen. Streets emptied as people barricaded themselves indoors, though no lock or door seemed able to keep the swarm at bay. In the heart of the chaos, Garcia stood before a television camera, addressing the nation. "Leave the city," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "This is not a fight we can win." As the broadcast cut to static, Garcia turned to face the darkness beyond the studio windows. He heard the whispers now, clearer than ever. "Why did you take us?" And for the first time in his life, he had no answer.
Thank you for tuning in to 5 Minutes to Midnight. Remember, as the clock ticks closer to the witching hour, keep your eyes wide open, your lights dim, and your headphones on. Join us next time, if you dare, for another brief journey into the abyss. Until then, keep watching the clock. The next midnight is closer than you think.